This is a 35mm film frame of Space Jam, and this is a bunch of Jell-O, a dessert that once represented the pinnacle of the American dream. You might be wondering what this delicious dessert and Jell-O have in common. Well, at the heart of photographic film is essentially a gelatin concoction of silver and chemicals that, when exposed to light and developed, create a photo. I'll be using Jell-O of various colors with sprinkles to explain how film emulsion works. And if that doesn't work, at least I should have some dinner. I should briefly go over what a positive and negative is in terms of film. This is a color positive strip of film, and here is a color negative strip of film of a photo I took of a potato. I lied. This is not a potato. But more importantly is that these images are inverted, with the positive image being the correct colors, while the negative being the inverted complementary colors to what they should be. Before we talk about color, we need to go back to a time when the world was in black and white. That's better. This positive on the left is still inverted from this negative on the right, just desaturated. Now, let's talk about using positive and negative films. For color positive film, after development, the film comes back as viewable positive images like what you see here. When someone takes a photo or video with film, they're actually using a negative acting film type. What this means is that after you put the film in your camera and take a photo, it reacts with the light and develops into the negative you see here. People always ask me, Kyle, why do negatives exist? And also, Kyle, why don't you get a life? Well, I can confidently answer the first question. To put it bluntly before we go more into how film works, the process of film reacting to light is by sheer nature negative acting. I will dive deeper in a moment. But here is an example of an actual black and white positive and negative. Pretty cool when it's inverted, huh? The positive becomes a negative, and the negative becomes a positive. The solid and flexible part of film is made of plastic. In this case, I'll represent it with a glass baking pan, but you can use your imagination. Nothing special about it other than that it needs to be transparent and needs to be strong enough to hold the next part. Gelatin, the same type you find in gummy bears and Jell-O, is the perfect substance to hold and suspend the chemicals that are reactive to light. That's right, the film is not vegan or vegetarian. Black and white film is simple and only needs one layer of gelatin, but color film needs many more. Arguably, the most important component of a film's emulsion is silver halide, represented by AgX, where Ag is the periodic table symbol for silver, the stuff that can kill vampires, and X representing the various halide salts such as bromide and iodide. These silver salts are photosensitive. In other words, they are what allow film to record an image when exposed to light. In a film emulsion, or Jell-O, these silver halide salts are formed into microscopic crystalline structures called grains. This is where the film grain gets its name from, and I prefer the grains as thick and juicy as possible, as you can see here. But what do I mean by thick and juicy grains? Well, let's take a closer look using an electron microscope, or at least a photo I found on the internet of an electron microscope looking at film grain. As you see here, we have silver halide grains floating around. Now, if you can see here, this is around 0.001 millimeters, which is really small. And for you Americans, unfortunately like myself, we have 1 out of 25,400 inches. It is very small, nonetheless. You can fit a lot of grains in one small picture area. Now, this is actually, like I said, what is sitting on a film emulsion. And these are the things responsible for the photo. Now you're wondering, oh wow, that is just kind of random. It's just like bits and particles floating around. Well, that's exactly the point of film. And that is one thing that digital still cannot really reproduce, is that simply this random pattern of silver halide floating around. We have big ones, we have small ones, we have them laying on top of each other. I particularly like this one. You can see it's literally leaning on the other one. But you're probably wondering, why are there size differences? And well, in this case, size actually does matter, because the bigger the halide grain is, the more susceptible it is to light, thus more light sensitive. So bigger, light sensitive, smaller, less light sensitive. Why does one want this? Well, in a darker environment, you're going to want more light sensitivity to hopefully pick up things that otherwise these small ones just might simply not be able to see. Hence why higher speed films or more light sensitive films have higher grain size, but with the downside of less grains in the same area, thus a smaller resolution, as we could think of it, because it's physically less material in the same area versus all these tiny grains you might find in a much slower/lower speed film, which is less light sensitive, but then with the added benefit of a sharper and less grainy appearance. All right, now let's get to using a camera. Silver halide grains start their life as translucent in the dark and remain completely unexposed until someone is ready to take a photo. Alright, so we have just exposed the silver halide suspended in gelatin to light for a brief moment. Now, what is actually happening here, and this is where it all starts to come together. The light is this light photon you can see right here. And what has happened is it has actually hit an electron off of the bromide, if you recall earlier. This is the silver halide. This is one of the many that are floating around in this singular crystal. And what has happened here is it has knocked a single electron off. Now, a single electron doesn't seem like a big deal, but what happens is this electron is now roaming around in this halide crystal, silver halide crystal, looking for something, go to now. Kind of like when a kid is kicked out of their house, they're looking for a friend or some place to crash. In this case, their friend or place to crash is none other than an imperfection in the crystal, as you can see by this little lightning bolt symbol. What happens is, over time, being exposed for that but brief moment, multiple of these electrons have been knocked out of their bromide and have now joined in the same place. What happens here is now that these electrons are all chilling in the same spot, they are starting to attract silver ions that have not set in the crystal well. And as you can see, what has then occurred is that they have attracted the silver into here. And what we result in is a silver halide crystal that is still like before. We still have plenty of silver halide around, but now we have this development seed sitting right there. This seed, although very small, once combined with developer, will yield the image. Okay, so you are probably confused because you are staring at a ton of sprinkles that I have hand-laid on a piece of paper. Well, I wasn't doing anything bad with my life, so it's fine. I am representing the emulsion, and more specifically silver halide in Jell-O with sprinkles. So for this demo, I'm going to use sprinkles to represent silver halide. Pretend we are laying on a piece of film. Specifically, pretend this is suspended in the gelatin. And pretend it is much closer to the images I showed you earlier, and also to scale. Obviously, this is not to scale. All right, so this is the negative, right? The negative acting film inside the camera. Let's pretend also that this is the image we have just exposed. So this is what the camera saw. It sees simply a pure white lamp and a pure black room. It has exposed this silver halide to it. Now what has happened? Well, now if you recall, what happened is these silver seeds have been formed from the process we discussed earlier. So I'm going to mark them with a Sharpie, specifically because it is supposed to be much smaller than the actual silver halide, because we're going to need a developer to actually make it full-sized. If you recall one more time, we had a simple scene, we exposed it, and look at that. These tiny little seeds are there, but we still have a lot more work to do. Now that these seeds are here, what's going to need to happen is we're going to need to develop it. The process of developing basically amplifies the little bits of silver that we have here as seeds, and amplifies it so that it becomes much larger to the point where we can actually use it. Pretend these are still sprinkles here. As you can see, now that we have developed it, it is much more prominent. You can actually see the lamp mostly, and I'll show this in a little bit actually with film. And you'll see actually what happens when I didn't do the final step, what it looks like. And it looks similar to this. But this is the lamp, and it's now been amplified. We still have silver halide chilling all over the place, and it's making it not transparent, and we don't want that. So the last step we do is, after the developer has been applied, we give it a fix bath, and what is resulted is nothing but the silver that was exposed from before. And everything else is a clear, transparent base, much like as I've shown the glass baking pan, or the plastic that would actually be on as part of the film. Now let's see an example of this happening to film sitting in the sun. Take this unexposed roll of black and white negative emulsion. If we leave just the tail sitting out of the can and exposed to light for a few days, we see a darkening of the film. This, as we discussed, is constant light energy slowly being used to convert the silver halide to silver. This is not the process, however, we want for taking images. Instead, we need to use something called a chemical developer to amplify the bits of silver, resulting in the halide grains that were exposed to light being completely converted into solid silver metal grains. Here, I'm using Kodak's D76 developer in developing that roll, and subsequently using a stop bath, which stops the film from developing further. But instead of using the final step of fixing or removing the unused silver halide, I pulled it out early to show what the developer really did. This is very similar to what resulted from letting the film sit in the sun. Since silver is a metal, the once translucent halide grains turn opaque silver. The more light that it hits a part of the film, the more silver metal is formed in that area. Where more silver metal is found, the darker those areas become as they block light. Simple, right? Here is an example of the film fully developed with the final fixer applied. You can see how the base of the emulsion is now transparent, and we now have a fully usable image of Barry B. Benson. All that remains on this film is the gelatin with solid silver metal grains suspended within. Combining these, we get a negative film strip represented by edible Jell-O. Edible does not necessarily imply good. It just means I can eat it and probably won't die. You can see the sprinkles suspended in the Jell-O/gelatin, just like silver halide is suspended in gelatin, only magnitude smaller and not made of mushy sugar sprinkles. So small, in fact, that you could fit 1.3, just read the screen, grains inside this sweet potato. It is important to note here, since silver metal is an opaque material, it blocks all colors of light equally. Hence, this is where we get grayscale images here that appear black and white, like in 50 Shades of Grey. Or at least that's what I assume that movie's about. Black and white film. Unfortunately, color film requires a lot more Jell-O, and with that, a lot more explanation. I don't want to fit that into this video because it's going to be a long one, and I know you guys have better things to do with your life, so I'm going to split this up into a second video. If the video hasn't come out already, please like and subscribe to this channel so that you'll be notified when the next video comes out. If the video's already come out, well, subscribe to learn other things. If you'd like to see more on how I make these videos and the behind the scenes, click the join button that should be maybe there or maybe there if you're in Australia, and click the join button. If you join, you can watch me as I think, or rather how I don't think, and how I work through the process of making a video and where I come to find other ideas. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.